All right, so it's really, really gloomy and rainy outside right now here in South Florida. And it's been like that for a few days. And don't get me wrong, I love all the sun that we get here. But these kinds of days are perfect for just kicking back indoors and finding new ways to edit my photos. And that's exactly how today's video popped up in my head. I actually plan to cover another topic that I'll save for a future video. Instead, I want to show you some easy ways to use Lightroom's editing tools to turn kind of like a blase photo into something that's a lot cheerier. But there's a twist because I'm going to apply the entire edit using Lightroom Web. A few months ago, I shared a video talking about why Lightroom Web should absolutely be added to your arsenal of editing tools. But back then, it was actually missing a few key masking tools that I use a lot. Fortunately, the Lightroom team has done it again because they've brought full parity between masking tools that you'll find in Lightroom Desktop and Classic with Lightroom Web. And this is something that should not be glossed over because when you think about it, you really have to understand that we now have access to some of the most powerful selection tools to edit our photos in a web browser. When you add in the fact that we also have the new Generative Remove tool in Lightroom Web, you can see why I want to share this with all of you. And I'm even more excited because I'll be presenting a session at this year's Adobe Max conference in Miami that's going to be all about Lightroom Web and Lightroom Mobile, and I cannot wait for that. But for now, let's dive into this video. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom Desktop. Nah, we're not in Lightroom. This is Lightroom Web. This is Lightroom Desktop. But can you see how you can easily kind of think like, oh, wait, I am in Lightroom Desktop, but we're not. We're actually in Chrome. So this is a Chrome browser tab, and we are running a pretty much a near desktop grade version of Lightroom in a browser tab. And really, I give so much kudos to the Lightroom team for being able to create this familiar feeling. So for those of us who are used to Lightroom Desktop, to be able to go to Lightroom for Web, this is not an easy undertaking. And the fact that you also have access to pretty much all of the most important tools that a photographer would reasonably need in a web browser is huge. I mean, think about it. You can be anywhere in the world as long as you have a web browser and access to the internet, and you have your photos in the cloud, of course, which I do. Even if you don't have your photos in the cloud, you can add photos right here in Lightroom Web and start editing them whenever you want. It really is amazing. But let me show you this workflow. All right, so why did I select this photo? Well, as you can see, I mean, it's not like some stupendous photo, but I do think it has a lot of potential. And really, that's how I go about selecting a lot of my photos, if I'm being completely honest, because it's easy to provide a photo that is like just stunning, like that. It just like it, I had to take a 17-hour flight and a 20-hour hike to get to this remote location that only 4 people alive have ever been to, and I got this perfect photo. A lot of people, I mean, it makes for a beautiful photo, but I think that for most people, most of you watching, like, you want to know how to take the photos that you take on the weekend or just here and there, and you want to know how to make it look better, and that's what I want to help you with. And to be able to do that in a web browser tab is really amazing. So that's why I selected this photo here. And I've got my histogram, and I'm going to start by making a few global changes, really nothing special. Usually the first things that I do is I'll go ahead and I'll take the white balance dropper, and you can see there's a little bit of gray sky. So it really doesn't actually make much of a difference, this custom white balance, but I am able to get the custom white balance because we are working with a DNG. Actually, I should show you that. This is a native DNG file taken with a Zeiss ZX1, or if you're outside of the US, the ZX1. I really do wish this camera found some market fit because it's such a cool camera. Do a Google search for it, Zeiss ZX1, and it actually was a phenomenal camera. But this is effectively a raw file. It's a DNG, which is Adobe's kind of raw format. So when I get a custom white balance, I'm actually getting a proper white balance. The other thing I'll do here, because also this is a raw file, is I'm going to change the profile from Adobe Color to Adobe Landscape. I generally do that when I am editing a raw landscape photo. And then I'm going to go all the way to the bottom here and enable lens correction. Now, there's not really much, as you can see here. If I kind of turn it off and then turn it back on, you can see there's very little correction to barrel distortion, but it does a nice job of correcting some of the lens vignetting. So this is good. Those are usually the things I do right off the bat. I apply the Adobe Landscape Profile, I'll get a custom white balance, and I'll apply lens correction. Now what I'm going to do is apply a few global changes. And what I'm doing is I just want to get the image to look kind of more evenly exposed. So I'm going to open up the exposure a little bit here. I'm going to also open up the white point a bit, drop the black point, and let's see with the highlights. Yeah, right around there, and shadows I'm going to drop just a little bit. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the exposure just a little bit more. All right, good. So already this is looking kind of cheery. Like if we kind of toggle the original and the after, it's already looking a little cheery, but we are getting to kind of a more evenly exposed photo. The other thing I'm going to do is apply one of my favorite types of contrast, which is an S-curve. Notice how I did not touch the contrast slider. I don't usually use the contrast slider. I have more granular control over contrast here. So I'm going to just open up the highlights a bit. I'm going to drop the shadows and let's adjust the midpoint. And when I say midpoint right here, this is generally the mid-tone area. So I was just getting this very, very minor S-curve here. All right. Now, one of the things that just keeps bothering me is this little kind of reed that's in front of this area here. Even though it's out of focus, it just kind of bothers me. So this is a perfect opportunity to show you that we actually do have Generative Remove, which was released recently with a Lightroom update in May. And I've got a video that covers how it works, so be sure to check it out. I'll leave a card right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this selection here, and I'm just drawing kind of like this. You can see that Lightroom automatically creates the selection for me because I had this checkbox here called Object Aware. Before it does anything, it'll first kind of make the selection, and then I can go ahead here and click on Remove Object. And actually, that first one looks really good. You do get 3 variations here. Generally, whenever you use any of Adobe's Generative Remove or Expand or Fill, you'll get 3 variations. So we can toggle through these. Well, that one's actually good too. That one's okay. So let's see, between number 2 and number 1, I like number 1 better. So you see how not only did it get rid of the reed, but I also want to highlight that it matched kind of the out of focus area, the bokeh area. So it looks completely seamless. And that to me is awesome. And again, not Lightroom Desktop, not Lightroom Mobile, Lightroom in a Chrome web browser. This is, I'm sorry. When you think about what you usually use your web browser for, generally for kind of consuming content, and here I'm actually doing a full-blown raw edit. I mean, I'm amazed, seriously, but let's get back to it. Now, of course, I can go ahead and remove other things, but I don't want to kind of get overboard. I actually want this to look kind of natural. That one read I was okay with removing, but I'm okay with all this other stuff. It creates a sense of depth, which is important for this type of photo. All right, so now what I want to do is simulate what many photographers call the Orton Effect. Now, normally you'll send a photo to Photoshop to do that, but you can kind of get away with it, and I'll show you how. If you go to the Effects section here, it's a combination of really of the texture, clarity, and dehaze sliders, and I actually have an entire video on how that works as well, so check that out. And so what I'll do is I'm going to add texture because texture will add a little bit more detail to things like the blades of grass and the various flowers here. But I'm also going to apply a negative clarity. And as I do that, you'll see that it almost looks like it's a soft glow. And that's because that's exactly what it's doing. It's removing contrast from the edges in the image. And then I'm also going to add just a little bit of a negative dehaze, but not that much. Like you can see here, just -3. Now you can see that the image did kind of lose some of that contrast. And so what I'll do after I apply that fake kind of Orton effect is I'll go and I'm going to deepen the shadows here and I'll bring it to the right just a little bit. And so you can see how we're kind of adding a little bit more of that contrast back. Now, if you don't want that, you can, again, just bring the shadows up over here. You can, or the point that I have in the shadows region. So you can play around with this. Like I can get it right around here. I can also add a bit of that vintage look, which is basically adding gray into the dark areas of the photo, into where the black point is. All right, so that's what I want to do globally. Like I don't want to do much more here. The rest of the things that I want to do are with masking tools. And if you watch my previous video where I did the edit using Lightroom Web, you'll remember that we didn't have things like the brush tool or the objects tool, as well as the people tool actually. And so having those tools now in Lightroom Web actually puts us more in parity with Lightroom Desktop than with Lightroom Mobile, because Lightroom Mobile is still missing some of these tools. So Lightroom Web, in some cases, actually is more powerful than Lightroom Mobile, which is something to think about because once again, we are running this through a web browser tab. So what I want to do is I want to apply more of a glow. Like I want to add more of a warm glow up here. So I have a video where I showed how you can do this. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but basically what you'll want to do is zoom out a lot. And then I'm going to select a radial gradient and I'm going to make a giant edit, something like this. And you can see the overlay here showing you kind of where that mask is spilling onto the image. So somewhere right around there. I also want to have a really, really strong feather. In fact, I'm just going to make it full strength. Now, with this radial mask outside of the image, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up exposure. And actually, let's go ahead. Let's zoom to fit so it's easier to see. I'm going to open up exposure a little bit, and then I'm going to go and add some negative dehaze. And you can see how we're getting this kind of nice, soft glow, but I want the glow to be warmer. And so I'm going to take the temperature slider and I'm going to jack it all the way to the right. And I'm also going to adjust the hue. So I'm going to move this hue a little bit to the left to make it a little bit warmer and add saturation to that. And so you can see here, if I toggle, you see how it just adds this beautiful glow. Now let's go ahead, let's rename this. If you've seen any of my tutorials where I use masking tools, you know that I love to rename things just to make it easier to identify. So I'm going to call this Corner Glow and then click OK. Now here's the thing though. The glow is spilling onto this flower here and I don't want it to. I actually want the glow to kind of fall behind it. So what I can do is I can click on Subtract and I can use the Objects tool here, which wasn't here before if you remember. And I'm going to use the Marquee tool instead of the brush. And I'm just going to draw here and make it so that we subtract that particular area. And you can see now how it actually does a great job. The flower is now not part of the selection. And now we can further refine it. So if the exposure is too bright, we can drop that down a little bit. Or if you want to make it stronger, you can do that as well. But notice how the flower is not being affected. And that to me is awesome. Now I will go ahead, actually, I want to add even more of a negative dehaze here. I really want it to be a nice soft glow. And I'm going to increase the saturation of that even more, pretty much to full strength. Now the other thing that I want to do is I want to add more saturation to the blue. And so to do that, let's go ahead, I'm going to create a new mask and I'm going to use the color range tool. So with the color range tool, what I'm going to do is click on a color that I want to sample. And you can see with the overlay that we have the color throughout the image sampled. We also have this refine slider. So if I bring it to the left, it's going to be pickier. It's going to be a lot more precise over the color, but I don't want that. I actually wanted to select more of that color range. So somewhere right around here. And then what I'll do is go to saturation, increase the saturation to really make it pop. I can also maybe cool it off a little bit just because it adds a nice contrast in terms of color temperature. So cooler colors versus the warmer glow in the background. And then let's go ahead. Let's rename this. We'll call this Flower Color Boost. Click OK. And then I'm going to create one more mask because now I want to create a custom vignette. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. Let's actually zoom in a little bit. And then I'm going to create a new mask. And instead of using, a lot of times actually people will just use the vignette tools here under the global edit. So they're right here under effects. You'll see you have the vignette tools, but basically what that does is it kind of darkens everything evenly from the corners, which I don't want. What I want to do is just create my own custom shape. That's where, for example, like I was just saying, a radial gradient is perfect. So I'm going to go ahead here and draw a gradient kind of like this right here in the middle. But here's what's important is that right now, if I start darkening things, you'll see that it's going to darken the inside, which I don't want. I actually want the opposite. So what you want to do is you want to click on this button here, which will invert. And so now you can see that basically we inverted the selection. And so I also want to create a very, very, very soft feather. So now I'm going to start darkening the edges just a little bit, not too much. And then we now have kind of like our custom vignette, which I can adjust the shape. I can adjust the positioning here. So if I want more of the darkness to come from down here, I can. Now let's go ahead here. Let's rename this to custom vignette. Let's go here. And the last thing I'm going to do is apply some sharpening. So here you can see we have the sharpening tools that we're familiar with. I do have a video on how sharpening works, so be sure to check that one out as well. And so I'm going to go ahead here and add some more sharpening. Now, generally, I like to keep radius to 1, detail I bring down maybe to about 15 here. And then with masking, the one thing we don't have in Lightroom Web currently is with Lightroom Desktop and Lightroom Mobile, if you were to press the Option or Alt key while dragging on these sliders, you would kind of have an alternate view of what the slider is doing. With Web, that currently doesn't work. I'm not sure if that's possible, like if we can get that. It would be nice, especially with masking, because with masking, it'd be easier to see that black and white mask view. So you can see exactly where sharpening is being applied. But generally, I find that masking right around, I would say 70 to 80%, applies the sharpening to the sharpest areas of the image or the high contrast edges of the image. Let's go ahead here. Let's zoom here. And there we go. You can see, let's toggle the original. So there's our original photo here, kind of gloomy, not much going on. But then we now have something that's a lot cheerier. Of course, you can refine this to taste. Like, let's say that glow is just too much for you. That's the thing I love in a web browser. We have non-destructive editing. So I can go to this corner glow mask here, and I could drop down the exposure. I can also go down here. Part of the reason why I made the dehaze so strong was so that I can show you that I can now come back and ease off on that glow so it looks a bit more realistic. And then if I want, because I did apply a bit of a vintage look by adding gray to the black point, I can go ahead down here and also add a little bit of grain just to give it a little bit of that, more of that vintagey look. And of course, you can go ahead and save this as a new version. So I can go ahead here, click on create a new version. I can call this, 2024 LR Web edit, create. And now I have this edit version available whenever I want. And the best part is that this version will sync to all of my copies of Lightroom. So if I go to Lightroom Desktop, it'll be there as well as on Lightroom Mobile. So that is super cool. And I do have a video of how versions works. It's one of Lightroom's most underrated features. You should definitely know how it works. So check that out. Now, if you enjoy these kinds of editing videos, how to improve your landscape photos, then I really recommend checking out my course called Lightroom Landscapes. It's not just a bunch of, how-tos. It's not just like, oh, all right, here's how we're going to do this. I spend a lot of time explaining how to create a methodology, a workflow to how to approach your landscape photo edits so that it makes sense, so that you go through and do the correct things in the right order to get the best results. So again, I'll leave a link to that below. It's called Lightroom Landscapes. I think you're going to like it a lot. And I did mention how Adobe did recently add generative remove to Lightroom for desktop, mobile, and web. So I've got this video here if you want to learn more about that. Of course, if this video was helpful, a thumbs up is always appreciated, and be sure to click on subscribe and the bell icon to get notified of all future videos. Thanks a lot, everyone.